Here is the Science of Being Great by Wallace Wattles. Chapter 1. Everyone can become great. There exists a principle of power in every individual. Through the intelligent use and direction of this principle, man can develop his own mental faculties. Man possesses an inherent power that enables him to grow in the direction he desires, and there appears to be no limit to the possibilities of his development. No man has yet attained such excellence in any faculty that it is not possible for someone else to surpass. This capacity lies in the original substance of which man is composed. Genius is the omniscience flowing within man. Genius is more than talent. Talent may merely be a disproportionately developed faculty in comparison to others, but genius is the union of man with God through his soul. Great men are always greater than their deeds, and are connected with a reserve of unlimited power. We do not know the limits of man's mental faculties. We do not even know if there are any. The power to increase knowledge is not given to lower animals. It belongs only to man and can be developed and increased by him. In general, lower animals can be trained and developed by man, but man can train and develop himself. He is the sole holder of this power, seemingly possessing it limitlessly. For man, the purpose of life is growth, much like for trees and plants. Trees and plants grow automatically according to set parameters, whereas man can grow at will. Trees and plants can only develop certain faculties and characteristics, but man can develop any capacity he has demonstrated. Nothing that is possible in the mind is impossible in flesh and blood. Nothing that man can think is impossible in practice. Nothing that man can imagine is impossible to achieve. Man is meant to grow and needs to do so. Continuous development is essential to his happiness. Life without progress becomes unbearable, so anyone who stops growing becomes foolish or mad. The greater his growth, the more harmonious and integral the man, the happier he will be. There is no ability in a man that is not present in all men, but if they develop naturally, there will not be two men who grow in the same way or are identical. Each individual comes into the world inclined to grow in a certain direction, making it easier for them to grow in that direction than in any other. It is a wise disposition as it offers infinite variety. It is as if a gardener planted all his plants in one pot. To a casual observer, they might appear similar, but their growth would reveal great difference. The same goes for men and women who are like a pot filled with plants. One might be a rose and add brightness and color to a dark corner of the world. Another might be a lily and teach a lesson of love and purity to all who behold it. Another might be a habitat for gentleness and conceal the abrupt outlines of a dark rock. Another might be a great oak among whose branches birds nest and sing, and under whose shade herds rest at noon. But each will be something precious, rare, perfect. There are unsuspected possibilities in the ordinary lives around us, so there are no ordinary people. In times of tension and national crisis, the beggar on the street corner, the village drunkard, become heroes through the activation of the power principle they possess within. There is genius in every man and woman waiting to be manifested. Every people has its greatest man or woman, someone towards whom everyone turns for advice in difficult times, someone instinctively recognized as very wise and insightful. People from the entire community turn to him in times of local crisis, implicitly acknowledging him as a great man who accomplishes small things in a grand manner. He could also accomplish great things, just like any man can, just as you can too. The power principle gives us exactly what we ask for. If we undertake only small things, it only gives us power for small things. But if we attempt to do great things in a great way, it will give us all available power. However, beware of undertaking great things in a reduced manner. We will discuss this later. There are two mental attitudes a man can have. One makes him like a football. It has resistance and reacts sharply when a force is applied to it, but it initiates nothing by itself. There is no power in it. Men of this type are controlled by circumstances and the environment. Their fate is decided by elements external to them. The power principle inside them is never truly active. They never speak or act on their own. The other attitude makes the man like a flowing spring. Power emanates from his center. He has within him a wellspring of water that gushes forth into eternal life and radiates a power perceived by those around him. The power principle in him is constantly in action. It is self-governing, has its own life. There is no greater good for a man or woman than becoming self-governing. All life experiences are designed by providence to force men and women to be self-governing, compelling them to cease being slaves to circumstances in order to master their environment. At its lowest level, man is the product of the chance of circumstances and a slave to fear. All his acts are reactions resulting from the pressure of external forces. He acts only as much as he is acted upon, and thus he initiates nothing. However, even the wildest possesses within him a power principle sufficient to dominate everything he fears, and when he learns this and becomes self-governing, he becomes a sort of god. The awakening of the power principle in man is the true conversion. It is passing from death to life. It is when the dead hear the voice of the Son of Man, come forth and live. It is resurrection and life. When man awakens, he becomes the Son of the Most High and receives all the power of heaven and earth. There has never been anything in any man that is not in you. No one has had more spiritual or mental power than what you can achieve, and no one has accomplished greater things than what you can achieve. You can become what you want to be. Chapter 2. Heritage and Opportunity. Inheritance does not prevent you from achieving greatness. No matter who or what your ancestors were, or how lowly their position, the path to the top is open to you. There is no such thing as inheriting a pre-established mental condition. No matter how small the mental inheritance we receive from our parents, it can be increased. No human being is born without the ability to grow. Inheritance is somewhat influences us. We are born with subconscious mental inclinations, such as a tendency towards melancholy, cowardice, or ill temper, but all these subconscious inclinations can be overcome when the true man awakens and appears. He can easily free himself from these inclinations. None of this should be an obstacle for you. If you have inherited undesirable mental inclinations, you can eliminate and replace them with desirable inclinations. A mental characteristic inherited in a habit of thinking comes from your parents. It is imprinted in your subconscious mind and can be replaced by an opposite habit of thought. You can replace a cheerful state of mind with a depressed state of mind. You can overcome cowardice or ill temper. Inheritance can also influence the morphology of the skull. There is some truth in phrenology, although not as much as its proponents claimed. It is true that different faculties are localized in the brain, and the power of a faculty depends on the number of active neurons in each area. Indeed, if a particular region of the brain is large, it is likely to function with more power than one whose cranial region is small. That is why people with a certain cranial configuration show talents such as musicians, speakers, mechanics, etc. On this basis, it has been argued that the shape of a man's skull should largely determine his position in life, but that is a mistake. It has been discovered that a small section of the brain with many small and active cells allows an equally powerful expression of faculties as a larger brain with larger cells. Furthermore, it has been discovered that if the power principle is introduced into any section of the brain with the will and purpose to develop a particular talent, brain cells can multiply indefinitely. Any faculty, power, or talent you possess, no matter how small or rudimentary, can be increased. You can multiply brain cells in a specific area until it acts with the strength you desire. It is also true that you can more easily operate through faculties that are already developed with the least effort. You can do things that come naturally. However, it is also true that if you make the necessary effort, you can develop any talent. You can do what you want to do and become what you want to be. When you set an ideal and proceed as later outlined, all the power to achieve that ideal is concentrated in the necessary faculties. More blood and nerve force go to the corresponding sections of the brain. Cells quicken, increase in number, and multiply. The correct use of man's mind will build a brain capable of doing what the mind wants to do. The brain does not make the man. Man makes the brain. Your position in life is not determined by inheritance, nor condemned to the lowest levels by circumstances or lack of opportunities. The power principle within man is sufficient for all the needs of his soul. No possible combination of circumstances can keep it at the lowest level as long as he asserts his personal ability and commits to rising. The power that shaped man and predisposed him to grow also controls the circumstances of society, industry, and government. This power never divides against itself. The power within you is in the things around you. When you start to move forward, things will arrange themselves for your benefit, as outlined in the following chapters of this audiobook. Man is made to grow, and all external things are designed to promote his growth. As soon as man awakens his soul and takes the path of growth, he discovers that not only is God in his favor, but also that nature, society, and his fellows are in his favor. Everything combines in his favor. By obeying the law, poverty is not an obstacle to greatness, because poverty can always be eliminated. Many great men have overcome humble origins to achieve greatness. In each case, we see how there is a power principle that elevates man above all opposition and adversity. The power principle exists within you. If you use and apply it determinedly, you can overcome all hereditary factors, dominate circumstances and conditions, and become a great and powerful personality. Chapter 3. The Source of Power. The Brain. The body, mind, faculties, and talents of man are mere instruments he uses to demonstrate his greatness. Alone, they do not make him a great man. A man may have a great brain, good mental faculty, brilliant talents, and yet he will not be a great man unless he uses all of it in a grand manner. This quality that allows man to use his abilities in a grand way makes him great, and we call this quality wisdom. Wisdom is the essential basis of greatness. Wisdom is the power to perceive what the best goals and means are to achieve them. It is the power to perceive what needs to be done. A man wise enough to know what needs to be done is good enough to desire only what is right, and capable and strong enough to accomplish what is necessary. He is a truly great man. He will instantly become a powerful personality in any community, and men will delight in doing him honor. Wisdom depends on knowledge. Where there is complete ignorance, there can be no wisdom or knowledge of what needs to be done. Man's knowledge is relatively limited, and thus his wisdom must be small, unless he can connect his mind to knowledge superior to his and draw from it by inspiration the wisdom his own limitations deny him. This is what truly great men and women can and have done. Man's knowledge is limited and uncertain, so he cannot obtain wisdom from within himself. Only God knows all truth, and thus only he can hold the true wisdom to do what is right at every moment. Man receives wisdom from God, and I will give an example. Abraham Lincoln had a limited education, but he had the power to perceive truth. In Lincoln, we clearly see that true wisdom is knowing what to do at all times and in all circumstances, having the will to do what is right, and having sufficient talent and ability to be competent and capable of doing what is correct. Such a man will instantly become a powerful personality in any community, and men will delight in honoring and promoting him. The entire world eagerly seeks such men. When Lincoln assumed the presidency, he was surrounded by a host of supposedly competent advisers, among whom very few agreed with him. Sometimes all opposed his policy, and sometimes almost all the North opposed what he wanted to do. Yet he saw the truth when others were misled by appearances. His judgment was rarely, if ever, wrong. He was both the most skillful statesman and the best soldier of his time. Where did this wisdom come from? A relatively poorly educated man, it was not due to the particular shape of his skull or the fine texture of his brain. It was not a physical characteristic, nor even a mental quality derived from superior reasoning power. Often mechanisms of reason do not lead to knowledge of truth. It was due to spiritual perception. He perceived truth, but where did this perception come from? We see something similar in Washington, whose faith and courage, through his perception of truth, kept the colonies united during the long and often despairing struggle of the Revolution. We see something similar in the phenomenal genius of Napoleon, who always knew in military matters the best means to adopt. We find that Napoleon's greatness was in nature more than in Napoleon. We discover behind Washington and Lincoln something greater than themselves. We see the same thing in all great men and women. They perceive truth. But truth cannot be perceived unless it exists, and there can be no truth unless there is a mind to perceive it. Truth outside of the mind does not exist. Washington and Lincoln were in contact and communication with a mind that knew all knowledge and contained all truth. The same is true for all those who demonstrate wisdom. Wisdom is obtained by reading the mind of God. Chapter 4. The mind of God. There is a cosmic intelligence that is in all things. It is the true substance, and from there all things come. It is intelligent substance or mental matter. It is God. Where there is no substance, there can be no intelligence, for where there is no substance, there is nothing. Where there is thought, there must be a substance that thinks. Thought cannot be an action, for action is movement, and it is inconceivable that movement thinks. Thought cannot be a vibration, for vibration is movement, and it is inconceivable that movement is intelligent. Movement is nothing more than the emotion of substance. If there is intelligence, it must be in the substance and not in the movement. Thought cannot be the result of movements in the brain. If thought is within the brain, it must be within the substance of the brain, and not in the movements that the substance of the brain makes. However, thought is not within brain substance, for without life this substance possesses no intelligence and is dead. Thought resides in the vital principle that gives life to the brain. It resides in the spiritual substance, that is, in the true being of man. The brain does not think. Man thinks and expresses his thought through the brain. There is a spiritual substance that thinks. The spiritual substance of man pervades his body, thinks and knows within the body, while the original spiritual substance, God, pervades all nature and thinks and knows within nature. Nature is as intangible as man and knows even more than man. Nature knows all things. The absolute mind has been in contact with all things since the beginning and possesses all knowledge. Man's experience covers a few things, and these things are known to man. But God's experience embraces all things that have occurred since creation, from the destruction of a planet to the passage of a comet or the fall of a sparrow. Everything that is and everything that has been is present in the intelligence that surrounds us and presses upon us from all sides. All the encyclopedias that men have written are but insignificant compared to the vast knowledge possessed by the mind in which men live, move, and have their being. The truths that men receive through inspiration are thoughts that dwell in this mind. If they were not thoughts, men could not perceive them, for they would have no existence and could not exist as thoughts unless there were a mind for them to exist. And that mind cannot be anything other than a substance that thinks. Man is a thinking substance, a proportion of the cosmic substance, but man is limited while the cosmic intelligence, which Jesus calls the Father, is unlimited. All intelligence, all power, and all force come from the Father. Jesus recognized this and stated it very clearly repeatedly. He attributed all his wisdom and power to his unity with the Father, for he perceived the thoughts of God. My Father and I are one. That was the origin of his knowledge and power. He showed people the necessity of spiritual awakening, of listening to his voice, and of being like him. He compared the unconscious man, who is a prisoner of circumstances, to a man dead in a tomb, whom he prayed to come out. God is spirit, he said. Be spiritually reborn, and you will see his kingdom. Listen to my voice, see what I am and what I do, and come out to live. The words he spoke are spirit and life. Accept them, and they will spring up in you a well of water. Then you will have life in you. I do what I see the Father doing, he said, meaning he read the thoughts of God. The Father teaches all things to the Son. If anyone wants to do God's will, he will know the truth. My teaching is not mine, but of him who sent me. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. The Spirit will guide you to all truth. We are immersed in the mind that contains all knowledge and all truth. The mind seeks to give us this knowledge, for our Father loves to give good gifts to his children. The prophets, seers, and great men and women, past and present, became great by what they received from God, not by what men taught them. This limitless reserve of wisdom and power is available to you, and you can draw upon it as needed. You can become what you want to be. You can do what you want to do. You can have everything you want. To do this, you must learn to become one with the Father, so that you can perceive truth, so that you can have the wisdom that enables you to know the right ends and the appropriate means to achieve those ends, and so that you can obtain the power and ability to use those means. At the end of this chapter, decide to set aside everything else and focus on consciously achieving unity with God. When I am safe in my sylvan home, trampling the pride of Greece and Rome, and when I lie beneath the pines where Key's transept shines on sacred evenings, I laugh at the wisdom and pride of the men of the sophist schools and the clan of the learned. For what are all those in their high presumption when the man on the mountain can commune with God? Chapter 5. Preparation Approach. God and He will approach you. If you resemble God, you can read His thoughts. Otherwise, it will be impossible for you to perceive the truth. You can never become a great man or woman until you have overcome anxiety, worry, and fear. It is impossible for a person who is anxious, worried, or fearful to perceive the truth. All things are distorted or perverted by such mental states, and those who are subject to these states cannot read the thoughts of God. If you are poor or suffer from commercial or financial problems, I recommend that you carefully study the first volume of this series, The Science of Getting Rich. There, you will find a solution to problems of this nature, however great or complex they may seem. There is no need to worry about financial matters. Everyone can overcome difficulties, obtain everything they need, and become rich by drawing from the same source that you rely on for: your mental development and spiritual power. Study this truth until it is firmly fixed in your thoughts, and anxiety is banished from your mind. If you are anxious or worried about your health, understand that it is possible to attain perfect health so that you have the necessary strength and even more for everything you wish to do. This intelligence that is ready to give you wealth, mental and spiritual power is also happy to give you health. Absolute health is available to you as long as you obey the simple laws of life and live correctly. Overcome illness and dispel fear. However, it is not enough to overcome anxiety or economic and physical worries. You must also overcome morally wrong actions. Look now into your inner consciousness for the motives that drive you and ensure that they are correct. You will have to reject lust and cease to be ruled by appetite. You must eat only to satisfy hunger, never out of gluttony, and make the flesh obey the spirit in every way. You will have to give up greed so as not to have unworthy motives in your quest to become rich and powerful. It is legitimate and right to desire wealth if you want it for the good of the soul, but not if you desire it for the desires of the flesh. Eliminate pride and vanity. Do not think of trying to dominate others or surpass them. This is a vital point, for there is no temptation as despicable as the selfish desire to dominate others. Nothing attracts the average man or woman more than sitting in places of honor at meetings, being respectfully greeted in the marketplace, and being called master by the radio. The struggle for power over others is the battle of the competitive world. You must rise above this world with its motives and aspirations and seek only life. Set aside envy. You can have everything you desire, and you do not need to envy what others have. Above all, make sure not to harbor malice or hostility towards anyone. Doing so separates you from the spirit you seek to make treasures your own. Whoever does not love his brother does not love God. Set aside all personal ambition and seek the higher good without being carried away by selfishness. Ponder all this, and at the center of your heart, examine these moral temptations one by one and make sure you will eliminate them. Then decide not only to set aside all bad thoughts, but also all actions and habits that do not match your noblest ideals. This is extremely important. Do this with all the strength of your soul, and you will be ready for the next step towards greatness as explained in the next chapter. Chapter 6, Social Perspective. Without faith, it is simple to please God. Without faith, it is impossible to become great. The characteristic that distinguishes all truly great men and women is unwavering faith. We see it in Lincoln during the dark periods of war, in Washington at Valley Forge, in Livingston, the infirm missionary who traversed the labyrinths of the dark continent with his soul aflame, in the determination to enlighten a cursed slave trade that his soul abhorred. We see it in Luther and in Francis Willard, in all men and women who have succeeded in being listed among the great of the world. Faith, not in oneself or in one's own power, but faith in the principle, in something great that upholds the good, and in which one can trust to achieve victory in due time. Without this faith, it is not possible for anyone to rise to greatness. The man who does not have faith as a principle will always be a man of little worth. Whether one has this faith or not depends on their perspective. You must learn to see the world as the result of evolution, constantly evolving and transforming, and not as a work completed millions of years ago. God was working with lower and rudimentary life forms, but each was perfect according to its kind. Larger and more complex organisms, both animal and vegetable, appeared through successive ages. The earth passed through successive stages in its development. Each stage was perfect in itself and was to be followed by a higher one. What I want you to understand is that so-called lower organisms are as perfect according to their kind as the higher ones. The world in the Eocene period was perfect, but God's work was not finished. This also applies to the present world, which physically, socially, and industrially is very good and everything is perfect. Nothing is complete anywhere, but God's work is perfect. This should be your perspective. The world and everything it contains is perfect even if it's not complete. Everything is well done in the world. That's the greatest fact. There's nothing wrong with anything. There's nothing wrong with anyone. All life's facts should be viewed from this standpoint. There's nothing wrong in nature. Nature is like a great presence prospering and working for the well-being of all. All things in nature are good and there's no wrong in them. Nature isn't complete because creation is still unfinished and will give man even greater wealth than in the past. Nature is a partial expression of God, and God is love. It's perfect but not complete. The same goes for society and human government. Even though there are unions, business groups, strikes, lockouts, etc., all these things are part of progress and are factors intervening in the evolutionary process to complete society. When it's complete, there will be harmony, but this cannot happen without these elements. J.P. Morgan is as necessary for the coming social order as the strange animals of the reptile age were for the life of the following period. And just as those animals were perfect according to their kind, Morgan is perfect according to his category. I have observed that everything is good, that government and industry are perfect now and are rapidly advancing towards perfection. Then you will understand that there's nothing to fear, no reason for anxiety, no cause for worry. Never complain about these things because they are perfect, and this is the best possible world for the stage of development that man has reached. This may seem crazy to many, perhaps to most people. They'll say, isn't child labor or the exploitation of men and women in dirty and unhealthy factories wrong? Aren't taverns wrong? Are you saying we have to accept all this and call it good? Child labor and similar things are no worse than the way of life, habits, and practices of cavemen. Their customs were appropriate to the savage stage of human development, and for that stage, they were perfect. Our industrial practices are those of the wild stage of industrial development, and they too are perfect. Nothing better is possible as long as we remain mentally wild in industry and business and do not become men and women. This cannot happen until the whole race rises to a higher perspective by the elevation of those individuals who are ready for a higher view. The remedy for all this is harmony, not in the teachers or employers but in the workers themselves, provided they reach a higher viewpoint. If they wish, they can establish complete fraternity and harmony in the industry. They have both the number and the power. They get what they want. If they want more in the realm of a higher, purer, and more harmonious life, they will receive more, of course. Currently they want more, but they only want more of the things that allow animal pleasure, and thus industry remains at the wild and brutal stage of the animal. When workers begin to rise to the mental level of life and demand more of the things that enable the development of the mind and soul, industry will immediately rise above the level of savagery and brutality. But now, it is perfect at its level. In fact, everything is very well. The same goes for lounges and dens of vice. If the majority of people desire these things, and it's just as necessary that they have them, then when the majority no longer desires these repugnant things, a world without them will be created. As long as men and women are at the level of bestial thinking, society will be partially disorderly and show bestial manifestations. The people make society what it is, and as people rise above bestial thought, Society rises above the bestial. But a society that thinks in a bestial way must have lounges and dens. It's perfect according to its kind, just as it was in the Eocene world, and that's fine. That doesn't prevent you from working for better things. You can work to complete an unfinished society instead of renewing a decadent society, and you can work with a better heart and a more hopeful spirit. This will make a huge difference for your faith and spirit. Considering civilization as something good that is improving rather than as something bad and decadent that is declining, this perspective will provide you with a mentality that progresses and expands, while the other represents a mentality that regresses and diminishes. One will make you grow, and the other will inevitably make you retreat. One will enable you to work for all eternal things, accomplish great works to complete all that is unfinished and disorderly, and the other will turn you into a mere reformer, almost hopelessly working to save a few lost souls in what you will consider a lost and condemned world. So you see, there's a great difference for you regarding the social viewpoint. Everything is fine in the world. Nothing can be wrong except my personal attitude. And I will correct that. I will see the facts of nature, events, circumstances, society, politics, government, and industry from a higher perspective. Everything is perfect, even if it's incomplete. Everything is the work of God. There. Everything is very well. Chapter 7. Individual Perspective. Though your position among the facts of social life is important, it's less important than your position towards your fellow beings, your acquaintances, friends, close relatives, and especially towards yourself. You must learn not to see the world as a lost and decadent thing, but as something perfect, glorious, and progressing towards the most beautiful fullness. And you must learn not to see men and women as lost and cursed things, but as perfect beings evolving towards fullness. There are no bad people or malicious individuals. A machine that's on tracks and pulls a heavy train is perfect in its class and good. The force of steam propelling it is good. If a broken rail derails the locomotive into a ditch, it hasn't become bad by being diverted. It's a perfectly good locomotive, but derailed. The power of steam that pushes it into the ditch and destroys it isn't bad. It's a magnificent force. So what's misplaced or used incompletely or partially isn't bad. There are no bad people. There are very good people who are off the rails, but they don't need condemnation or punishment. They just need to get back on track. Often what's undeveloped or incomplete seems bad to us because of our habitual way of thinking. The root that produces a white lily is an ugly thing that could be looked at with disgust. But how foolish we would be to condemn that plant for its appearance when we know the lily is within it. The roots are perfect according to their kind. It's a perfect but incomplete lily. And so, we must learn to look at every man and every woman, however contemptible they may seem on the outside. They are perfect at their existential stage and are completing themselves. Everything is very good once we understand this fact. As we attain this viewpoint, we lose all desire to find faults in people, to judge, criticize, or condemn them. We no longer act like those who save lost souls, but like those among angels working towards the realization of a glorious paradise. We are born of the Spirit and behold the kingdom of God. We no longer see men as walking trees, but our vision is complete. We have only good words to say. Everything is good. A great and glorious humanity is coming to fullness. In interacting with others, we adopt an expansive and broad mental attitude. We see ourselves as grand beings and begin to care for that and their affairs grandly. But if we fall into the other extreme and see a lost and degenerated race, we sink into a contracted mentality, and our relationship with men and their affairs will be limited and contracted. Remember to firmly maintain your point of view. Then you cannot avoid treating your acquaintances, neighbors, and even your own family as a great personality treats others. This same perspective must be the one you adopt for yourself. You must always see yourself as a grand and progressing soul. Tell yourself, there is something in me of which I am made, which knows neither imperfection, weakness, nor disease. The world is incomplete, but God in my consciousness is perfect and complete. Nothing can be wrong except my own behavior, and my own behavior can only be wrong when I disobey what is within me. I am a perfect manifestation of God as far as I have come, and I will continue to advance to be complete. I will trust and not be afraid. When you are capable of saying this consciously, you will have lost all fear and taken a great step on the path to developing a powerful and grand personality. Chapter 8. Dedication. Having gained the perspective that allows you to relate correctly to the world and your fellow beings, the next step is concentration, and concentration in its true sense is simply obedience to the soul within you, that force which has always urged you on the ascending path of progress. It's the principle of divine power, and you must obey it without questioning. No one can deny the fact that if you want to be great, that greatness must be a manifestation of something within you, and it must be the greatest and highest of your inner faculties. It's neither the mind, nor the intellect, nor reason. You cannot be great if you rely more on your principles than on your reasoning. Reason knows neither principles nor morality. It's like a lawyer who will argue for any cause. The reasoning of a thief will plan a theft and murder with the same ease as the reasoning of a saint would plan a great philanthropic project. Reason helps us see the best means and the best way to do what is right, but it never shows us what is right. Intellect and reason serve the selfish man for his selfish ends just as easily as they serve the unselfish man for his unselfish ends. Use intellect and reason regardless of principles, and you can become known as a very capable person, but you will never be known as a person whose life demonstrates the power of true greatness. There's too much entertainment for intellect and reason, but too little training in obedience to the soul. The only thing that can be wrong in your personal attitude is not obeying the principle of power. Returning to this inner center will always enable you to find the purest idea of what is right for every relationship. To be great and have power, all you need to do is make your life accord with the purest idea as you find it within you. Any compromise at this stage is at the expense of a loss of power. You must remember this. There are many ideas in your mind that have been outgrown, and yet, by habit, you still allow them to control your actions. Let go of all that. Abandon all that has been outgrown. There are many indecent social or other customs that you continue to follow, despite knowing they tend to diminish you and make you act petty. Overcome all that. I'm not saying you must completely abandon conventions or commonly accepted standards of right or wrong. You cannot do that, but you can free your soul from most limitations that hinder most of your peers. Don't dedicate your time or energy to supporting outdated religious or other institutions. Don't let yourself be bound by beliefs you don't believe in. Be free. Perhaps you've formed sexual habits in your mind or body. Abandon them. You may still be afraid things will go wrong or others will betray or mistreat you. Overcome all that. If you are still selfish in many ways and on many occasions, cease to be so. Abandon all that and replace it with the best actions you can conceive in your mind. If you desire progress but do not act, it might be because your thought is greater than your actions. You must act in the same way that you think. Let your thoughts be governed by principles, then live by your thoughts. Let your attitude in business, in politics, in neighborhood affairs, and in your own home be the expression of the best thoughts you can have. Let your behavior towards all men and women, great and small, especially towards your own family circle, always be as kind, graceful, and courteous as you can imagine. Remember your perspective. You are a god among other gods, and you must behave accordingly. The steps to total concentration are few and simple. You must not be ruled by the lower. If you want to be great, you must rule from above. Therefore, you cannot be governed by physical impulses. You must subject your body to your mind, but your mind without principles can lead you to the selfishness of immoral paths. You must subject your mind to your soul, but your soul is limited by the boundaries of your knowledge. You must subject it to that universal soul that doesn't need to scrutinize understanding, but before which all things are spread out. That is dedication. Say consciously, I give my body to be governed by my mind, I give my mind to be governed by my soul, and I give my soul to be guided by God. Make this dedication consciously, and you will have taken the second great step on the path to greatness and power. Chapter 9. Identification. Having recognized God as the progressing presence in nature, in society, and in your fellow beings, By harmonizing with all this and having dedicated yourself to doing what within you impels the greatest and highest, the next step is to become aware and fully recognize the fact that the principle of power within you is God Himself. You must consciously identify with the highest. It's not a false posture to assume, it's a fact to acknowledge. You are already one with God and desire to be aware of it. There is a substance, the source of all things, and this substance possesses within itself the power to create all things. All power is inherent in it. This substance is conscious and thinks, works with perfect understanding and intelligence. You know this to be so, because you know the substance exists and consciousness exists. Moreover, the substance must be conscious. Man is conscious and thinks. Man is substance, otherwise he is nothing and does not exist at all. If man is substance and thinks and is conscious, then he is conscious substance. It is inconceivable that there is more than one conscious substance, so man is the original substance, the source of all life and all power embodied in physical form. Man cannot be anything other than God. Intelligence is one and the same everywhere, so it must be attributed to the same substance. There cannot be one type of intelligence in God and another type of intelligence in man. Intelligence can only exist in intelligent substance, and intelligent substance is God. Man is of the same nature as God, and therefore all talents, powers, and possibilities present in God are found in man, not just in some exceptional men, but in all. All power is given to man in heaven and on earth. It is written, "You are gods." The principle of power in man is man himself, and man himself is God. But although man is the original substance and possesses within himself all power and possibilities, his consciousness is limited. It does not know everything there is to know. It is subject to error and misconception. To save himself from this, he must unite his mind with what is outside of him and knows all. He must become one with God. There exists a spirit that surrounds him, closer than breath, closer than hands and feet, and this spirit is the memory of everything that has occurred, from the greatest upheavals of nature to the tiniest events in the present time. Everything that currently exists is also in this spirit. In this spirit lies the grand design behind all of nature. Man is surrounded by a spirit that knows all, past, present, future. Everything men have said, done, or written is present there. Man comes from the same material as this spirit and can identify with it in such a way as to know what it knows. "My Father is greater than I," said Jesus. "I come from Him. I and my Father are one." He shows the Son all things. The Spirit will guide you into all truth. Your identification with the infinite must be accomplished by conscious recognition, by recognizing as a fact that God alone exists and that all intelligence is in the one substance. You must affirm the following: there is only one and He is everywhere. I unite with the conscious unity at the highest. It is not me, but the Father. I want to be one with the Supreme and lead a divine life. I am one with infinite consciousness. There is only one consciousness, and I am that consciousness. It is I who speak. If you have been meticulous with what has been outlined in the previous chapters, if you have attained the true perspective and your dedication is complete, it will not be difficult for you to achieve this conscious identification, and once achieved, the power you seek is yours, for you have become one with all the power that exists. Chapter 10. Idealization. You are part of the original substance, and the thoughts of the original substance have creative power. Everything that comes from your thought must transform into a visible, even material form. Therefore, the thought of the original substance is a reality and a real thing, even if it is not visible to mortal eyes. This is a fact you must impress upon your mind. A thought held in the thinking substance is a real thing with a real existence, even if it is not visible to you internally. You take shape according to how you think of your being, and you surround yourself with the unseen forms of those things with which your thoughts are associated. When you desire something, imagine it clearly and hold it firmly in your mind until it becomes a definite thought form. If your habits do not separate you from God, the thing you desire will come to you in material form. You must do this according to the law by which the universe was created. Do not have any idea of yourself connected with disease or discomfort. Instead, create an idea of yourself as healthy. Form an image of yourself as a strong and healthy person. Impress this mental image upon the creative intelligence, and if your practices do not violate the laws by which the physical body is built, your mental image will manifest in your flesh. This is also a certainty, for it comes from obedience to the law. Make an idea of yourself according to what you desire to become, and establish your ideal as near perfection as your imagination is capable of conceiving. Let me give you an example. If a young law student wishes to become great, he must imagine relying on the perspective, dedication, and identification mentioned earlier, himself as a great advocate, pleading eloquently and with unmatched power before the judge and jury, as if he had unlimited mastery of truth, knowledge, and wisdom. He must imagine himself as a great advocate in every possible situation. And even though he is still a student, he can never forget or cease to be the great advocate in the idea he has of himself. As life becomes more defined and habitual in his mind, both internal and external creative energies come into play. He begins to manifest from within, and all the essential external elements involved in the idea start to propel him towards it. He becomes that image, and God acts through him. Nothing can prevent him from becoming what he desires. Similarly, the music student envisions performing perfect harmonies and delighting a large audience. An actor forms the highest idea he can have of his art and applies it to himself. The farmer and the mechanic do exactly the same. Focus on your ideal of what you desire to do, think carefully, and ensure that you make the choice that brings you the most satisfaction overall. Don't pay too much attention to the advice and suggestions of the people around you, because no one knows better than you what suits you. Listen to what others say, but always draw your own conclusions. Don't let others decide what you should be. Be what you believe you want to be. Don't be misled by a false sense of obligation or duty to others. You cannot have any obligation or duty to others that prevents you from bringing out the best in yourself. Be true to yourself, and you cannot be false to any man. When you have fully decided what you want to be, create the highest conception of that thing that you are capable of imagining, and make this conception an idea. Hold on to this idea as a fact, as the true truth about yourself, and believe in it. Shut your ears to all contrary opinions, no matter if people call you crazy and a dreamer. Keep on dreaming. Remember that the hungry lieutenant always saw himself as the great general of the armies and master of France, becoming an external realization what he had in mind. You have taken note of everything that has been said in the previous chapters. Act as directed in the following ones, and you will become what you wish to be. Chapter 11. Realization. If you stop reading the last chapter, you will never become great. You will simply be a dreamer of dreams, a builder of castles. Many stop there because they do not understand the need for immediate action to materialize the vision and bring the idea to life. Two things are necessary. First, the creation of the idea, and second, the actual appropriation of everything that enters and surrounds that idea. We have already talked about the first step, so let's now move on to the instructions for the second. When you have created your idea, you are already internally what you want to be. Then, you must become externally what you want to be. You are already great internally, but you are not yet accomplishing great things on the outside. You cannot immediately begin to do great things. You cannot be a great actor, lawyer, musician, or any other personality you aspire to be. No one will entrust you with great responsibilities, because you have not yet made yourself known. However, you can still start to do small things grandly. Here is the secret. You can start to be great today, at home, in your shop, in your office, on the street, everywhere. You can start to make yourself known as someone great by performing every action, no matter how small and trivial, with all the strength of your grand soul to show your family, friends, and neighbors what you really are. Do not presume about yourself. Do not boast to people about what a great person you are. Just live grandly. No one will believe you if you say you are great, but no one can doubt your greatness if you demonstrate it through your actions. Be just, generous, courteous, and kind in your intimate circle so that your family, your partner, your children, your brothers and sisters know that you are a noble and grand soul. Be great, just, generous, courteous, and kind in all your relationships with others. Grand people are never otherwise. That's your attitude. Lastly, and most importantly, you must have absolute faith in your own perception of truth. Never act hastily. Do things calmly and wait until you feel that you know the true way. And once you feel that you know the true way, act according to your faith, even if the whole world disagrees with you. As long as you do not believe in what God tells you, the smallest things will be inaccessible to you, and you cannot call upon your wisdom or knowledge for the greater things. When you deeply feel that an action is right, act accordingly and have absolute faith that the consequences will be good. When you are convinced that something is true, no matter how it may seem, accept that thing as true and act accordingly. The only way to develop a perception of truth in great things is to absolutely trust your current perception of truth in small things. You seek to develop this same power or faculty, the perception of truth, learning to read the thoughts of God. Nothing is great, nothing is small in the eyes of omnipotence. It holds the sun in place, but also observes the fall of a sparrow, counting the hairs on your head. God is as interested in the small events of daily life as in the affairs of nations. You can perceive truth in family and neighborhood matters, just as in national affairs. Having absolute faith in the truth contained in these small matters, as it is revealed to you daily, is the way of thinking. When you feel deeply compelled to follow a path that seems contrary to all reason and worldly judgment, take that path. Listen to others' opinions and advice, but always do what you deeply feel inside, because that is the only true thing. Have absolute faith in your own perception of life, but make sure to listen to God and act without haste, fear, or anxiety. Trust your perception of truth in all circumstances and events of life. If you deeply feel that certain people will be at a certain place at a certain time, go there with absolute faith that you will find them, and they will be there, no matter how improbable it may seem. If you are certain that certain people are doing certain actions, act with the faith that they are doing those things. If you are sure of the truth of any circumstance or event, whether near or far, past, present, or future, trust your perception. Initially, you might occasionally make mistakes due to your imperfect inner understanding, but you will soon start to be right almost all the time. Soon your family and friends will increasingly submit to your judgment and be guided by you. Soon your neighbors and fellow citizens will come to you more and more for advice. Soon you will be recognized as someone great in small things and increasingly called upon to handle larger things. It all boils down to absolutely following your inner light and perception of truth. Obey your soul. Have absolute faith in yourself. Never consider yourself as someone who doubts, distrusts, or errs, for if I judge, my judgment is true. For I seek not my glory, but only that of the Father. Chapter 12. Haste and Habit. There is no doubt that you have many domestic, social, physical, and financial problems that seem to require an immediate solution. You have debts to pay or other obligations to fulfill. You are going through an unhappy situation and feel the need to act immediately. Do not rush and do not act on superficial impulses. You can trust God to solve all your personal problems. There is no haste. All is well in the world. There is an invisible power within you, and that same power is present in the things you desire. They are drawn to you as strongly and determinedly as your desire attracts them to you. Therefore, the tendency of a firm thought must be to attract the things you desire and gather them around you, as long as you maintain your thoughts and faith correctly. Everything should be fine. Nothing can go wrong except your own personal attitude, and you will not be wrong if you trust that. Do not be afraid. Haste is a manifestation of fear, for the one who is unafraid has all the time needed. If you act with absolute faith in your own perception of truth, you will never be late or early, and nothing will go wrong. If things seem to be going wrong, do not worry, for it is only an appearance. Nothing can go wrong in this world except yourself, and only you can be wrong by adopting a wrong mental attitude whenever you feel nervous, worried, or in a hasty attitude. Sit down and think about it. Play some game or take a vacation, travel, and everything will be fine when you return. The more you rush, the farther you move away from greatness. Haste and fear instantly sever your connection with the universal spirit, so you will gain no power, wisdom, or information until you are calm. Yielding to haste hinders the action of the power principle within you. Fear turns strength into weakness. Remember that balance and power are inseparably linked. A calm and balanced mind is a strong and great mind, whereas a rushed and agitated mind is a weak mind. Every time you succumb to haste, know that you have lost the right perspective. You begin to see the world, or a part of it, as in error. During those moments, listen to Chapter 6 of this book and consider the fact that this work is perfect now, with everything it contains. Nothing is wrong, and nothing can go wrong. Maintain balance, calm, joy, and faith in God. Regarding habits, your greatest difficulty will probably be overcoming your old ways of thinking and forming new habits. The world is governed by habit. Kings, tyrants, masters, and plutocrats maintain their position solely because people have habitually accepted them. Things are as they are only because people have habitually accepted them as such. When the people change their habitual thought about government, social, and industrial institutions, these institutions will change. Habits govern us all. Perhaps you have made it a habit to consider yourself an ordinary person with limited ability, or as someone more or less a failure. You are what you habitually think of yourself. Now you must form a greater and better habit. You must fashion an idea of yourself as a being of unlimited power and habitually think that you are that being. It is habitual thought, not mere recitation of chains of words or superficial formulas, that decides your destiny. In summary, the use of prayer and affirmation aims to change your habits of thought. Any mental or physical action frequently repeated becomes a habit. The goal of mental exercises is to repeat certain thoughts over and over until they become constant and habitual. Thoughts we constantly repeat become convictions. What you must do is repeat this new thought of yourself until it becomes the only way you think of yourself. Habitual thought, and not that surrounding circumstances, has made you what you are. Every individual has an idea of himself that qualifies and orders all external facts and relationships. You qualify your reality according to the idea that you are a strong and great person, or according to the idea that you are limited and weak. If it is the latter, you must change your idea of yourself. Do not pretend to become great by merely repeating words or superficial formulas, but rather repeat the idea of your own power to qualify external facts and decide your destiny by this idea. You will find an illustrative mental exercise and further guidance on this point in another chapter. Chapter 13, Thought. Greatness is achieved only through constant thought in great terms. No man can become great externally if he is not great internally, and no man can be great internally if he does not think. No education, reading, or study can make you great in thought, but thought can make you great with very little study. Too many people try to do something by themselves through reading books without thinking, and they all fail. One does not develop mentally by what he reads, but by what he thinks about what he reads. Thinking is the hardest and most exhausting work of all. That is why many avoid it. God created us in such a way that we are constantly urged to think. We are compelled to engage in some activity to escape from thought. The continual pursuit of pleasure, to which most people devote all their leisure time, is simply an effort to escape from thought. If you find yourself alone or have nothing distracting like a novel to read or a show to watch, you must think. Thus, to escape from thought, one turns to novels, shows, and anything that provides entertainment. Most people spend most of their free time avoiding thought, which is why they are where they are. We do not progress until we start to think. Read less and think more. Read about important subjects and think about great themes and questions. Nowadays, there are few truly great figures in politics in our country. Our politicians are insignificant. There is neither Lincoln, Webster, Clay, nor Calhoun, nor Jackson, for our present statesmen only concern themselves with sordid and petty matters, with money and convenience issues, with partisan success and material wealth, without any concern for ethics. Thinking in this manner does not attract great souls. The statesmen of Lincoln's time and earlier epochs cared about issues of eternal truths, human rights, and justice. Men thought about great subjects, had great thoughts, and became great men. Thought, and not only knowledge or information, shapes personality. Thinking is growing, because one cannot think without growing. One thought leads to another thought. I write one idea and others will follow until I've written a page. You cannot understand your own mind because it has no bottom or limits. Your initial thoughts may be rudimentary, but as you continue to think, you will enrich yourself more and more. New brain cells will be activated and you will develop new abilities. Heritage, environment, circumstances, everything must yield before you, if you exercise sustained and continuous thought. Conversely, if you neglect to think for yourself and only use others' thoughts, you will never know what you are capable of and will end up being incapable. There can be no true greatness without original thought. Everything a person does externally is the expression and culmination of their inner thought. No action is possible without thought, and no grand action is possible without a great thought preceding it. Action is the second form of thought, just as personality is the materialization of thought. Environment is the result of thought. Things gather or organize around you according to your thought. As Emerson says, the central idea, the conception you have of yourself, orders and qualifies all events in your life. If you change this central idea, you will change the order or qualification of all the facts and circumstances in your life. You are what you are because you think what you do, and you are where you are because you think as you do. Thus you see the immense importance of thinking about the essential aspects that have been presented in the previous chapters. You must not accept them superficially, but you must ponder them until they become part of your central idea. Return to the theme of perspective and consider from all angles the enormous fact that you live in a perfect world among perfect people, and that nothing can go wrong in you except your own personal attitude. Reflect on all of this until you become aware of it and understand its full significance for you. Think that this world is God's world, and it is the best of all possible worlds, as it has been completed by the processes of organic, social, and industrial evolution, and continues to evolve toward greater fullness and harmony. Think that there exists a great principle of life and perfect and intelligent power, the origin of all changing phenomena in the cosmos. Ponder all of this until you see that it is true, and until you understand that you must live and act as a citizen of a perfect whole. Then, think of the wonderful truth that this great intelligence is within you, and that it is your own intelligence. It is an inner light that pushes you toward what is just best, toward the greatest act and the highest happiness. It is a principle of power within you that gives you all the ability and genius that exist. It will unwaveringly guide you toward the best if you submit to it and walk toward the light. Think of the concentration you perform when you say, "I will offer to my soul." It's a phrase of enormous meaning because it can revolutionize the attitude and behavior of the ordinary person. Then think of your identification with the Great Supreme, from whom all your knowledge is derived, as well as all your wisdom for you to claim. You are a god if you think like a god. If you think like a god, you cannot help but act like a god. Divine thoughts will surely manifest as a divine life. Powerful thoughts will lead to a powerful life. Grand thoughts will manifest in a grand personality. Ponder all of this deeply, and then you will be ready to act. Chapter 14. Action at Home. Do not think that you will become grand. Think that you are grand now. Do not think that you will start acting grand in the future. Start now. Do not think that you will act grand when you are in a different setting. Act grandly now. Do not think that you will act grand when you start dealing with important things. Start dealing with simple things grandly. Do not think that you will become grand when you are surrounded by more intelligent people or people who will understand you better. Start interacting grandly with the people around you now. If you are not in an environment that allows you to develop your best abilities and talents, you can change locations over time, but in the meantime, be grand wherever you are. Lincoln was just as grand when he was the people's lawyer as he was when he was president. As the people's lawyer, he did ordinary things grandly, and that led him to become president. If he had waited until he arrived in Washington to start being grand, he would have remained unknown. One does not become grand by where one is, or by the things that surround us. What we receive from others does not make us grand, and we can never manifest our grandeur by depending on others. Grandness will only manifest when you start to manage on your own. Reject all thoughts of dependence on external things, be they objects, books, or people. As Emerson said, Shakespeare was not made by studying Shakespeare, but by thinking Shakespeare's thoughts. No matter how people treat you, even those in your own home, it has nothing to do with your grandeur. It cannot prevent you from being grand in the way you treat them and your attitude toward them. As Jesus said, "Your Father is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked." Would he be a grand God if he withdrew or became angry because people are ungrateful and do not appreciate him? Treat the ungrateful and the wicked grandly as God does. Do not boast of your grandeur, because in your essential nature, you are no greater than those around you. You may have adopted a way of life and thinking that they have not yet found, but they are perfect in their own plan of thinking and action. You have no right to honor or special attention for your grandeur. You are a god, but you are among gods. You will fall into a boastful attitude if you see the faults or failures of others and compare them to your own virtues and successes. Chapter 15. Action outside the home. The same rules that apply at home should apply everywhere. Never forget that this is a perfect world and that you are a god among gods. Have blind confidence in your own perception of life. Trust the inner light more than reason, but make sure your perception comes from the inner light. Act with calm and dignity. Be attentive and at peace. Your identification with the Supreme Mind will give you all the knowledge you need to guide you in any situations that may arise in your life or in the lives of others. All you need is supreme tranquility and confidence in the eternal wisdom within you. If you act with serenity and faith, your judgment will always be right, and you will always know exactly what to do. Do not rush, do not worry, and remember Lincoln during the dark days of the war. James Freeman Clarke recounts that, after the Battle of Fredericksburg, Lincoln was the only one to give faith and hope to the nation. Hundreds of important men from across the country entered his room sad and left happy and full of hope. They had come face to face with the Most High. They had seen God in this tall, awkward, patient man. Even if they did not know it, have full confidence in yourself and your own ability to handle any situation that may arise. Do not worry if you are alone or if you need friends. They will come to you at the right time. Do not worry if you feel ignorant. The information you need will be provided at the right moment. What drives you forward lies in the things and people you need, drawing them to you. If you need to meet a particular person, they will be presented to you. If there is a specific book you need to read, it will be placed in your hands at the appropriate time. All the knowledge you need will come to you, both from external and internal sources. Your knowledge and talents will always meet the demands in every situation. The world like Don Quixote fighting windmills or knocking down anything to prove that you are someone. Live a grand life where you are now and in the daily work you must accomplish. For the grandest things will find you. The grandest things will come to you to ask you to do them. Be as impressed by the worth of a man to treat even a vagabond with the greatest respect. Everything is God. All men and women are perfect. Let your manners be those of a god governing other gods. Do not reserve all your consideration for the poor, for the millionaire is as good as the vagabond. It is a perfect world, so there is no one or nothing that is not perfect. Make sure to keep this in mind in treating all things and everyone. Form an idea of yourself carefully. Make an idea of yourself as you wish it to become reality, and with the intention of realizing it completely. Do everything as a god would and say everything as a god would say it. See other men and women as a god sees other divine beings. Begin this way and continue so that your growth in capacity or power is rapid and grand. Chapter 16. Some additional explanations. Let's return to the question of perspective because, in addition to being of vital importance, it can cause the most problems for the student. In part, we have been conditioned by mistaken religious teachers to see the world as a ship that is sinking and being swept by the storm toward a rocky coast. In the end, total destruction is inevitable, and all one can do is save a few members of the crew. This perspective teaches us to see the world as something going from bad to worse, and to think that the disharmony and discord that exist must continue and intensify until the end. This robs us of hope in society, in government, in humanity, and gives us a decadent perspective and a contracted mind. Is everything going wrong? No. The world has not sunk. It's like a magnificent steamship, with its engines in place and its machinery in perfect condition. The holds are full of coal, and the ship is well equipped for the journey. Everything is fine. Measures have been taken that omniscience could conceive for the safety, comfort, and happiness of the crew. The ship is at sea, sailing from side to side, because no one knows the correct course yet. We are learning to steer it, and with time, we will arrive at the port of absolute harmony. The world is good, and it is getting better and better. The current problems and lack of harmony are only the result of the movement of the ship due to our imperfect navigation. All this will disappear in due time. This perspective gives us a vision of growth and an expansive mind. It allows us to think about society, ourselves, and to accomplish great things. In fact, we find that no one can go wrong in this world or in any of its parts, including our own affairs. If everything is progressing towards fullness, then nothing is going wrong. And since your personal affairs are part of the world, they are not going wrong either. You and everything concerning you are progressing towards fullness. Nothing can stop this forward movement except yourself, and you can only slow it down by adopting a mental attitude contrary to that of God. If you are doing well, nothing can go wrong and you have nothing to fear. No economic or other catastrophe can happen to you if your personal attitude is correct, because you are part of what is growing and advancing. Therefore, you must also grow and advance. Furthermore, your way of thinking will mainly be influenced by your view of the cosmos. If you see the world as lost and ruined, you will see yourself as a part of it and as participating in its sins and weaknesses. If your perspective on the world as a whole is hopeless, your view of yourself will not be hopeful. If you think the world is declining towards its end, you cannot imagine yourself progressing. If you do not consider God's work good, you cannot think well of yourself. And if you do not think well of yourself, you cannot become grand. I repeat that your situation in life, including your material environment, is determined by the concept you habitually have of yourself. When you form an idea of yourself, it is difficult for a corresponding image not to form in your mind. If you consider yourself incapable and ineffective, you will be surrounded by a mediocre or poor environment. If you do not think well of yourself, you will likely imagine a more or less poor environment. If these thoughts are frequent, they will become the invisible form that surrounds the mind and accompanies it constantly. Over time, through the regular action of eternal creative energy, these invisible thoughts will transform into material things. In other words, you are surrounded by your own thoughts turned into material things. See nature as a grand consciousness progressing, and see human society exactly the same way. Everything is the same process, from a single source, and everything is good. You are made in the same way as God. All your components of God are part of you, and all the power that God possesses is part of man. You can progress in the same way you see God doing. You have within you the source of all power. Chapter 17. More about thought. Let your thought flow freely. You will never become grand until your own thoughts have made you grand, which is why it is of paramount importance that you think. You will never do great things on the outside until you have grand thoughts on the inside, and you will never think grand thoughts until you think of truth, of facts. To think of grand things, you must be absolutely sincere, and to be sincere, you must know that your intentions are right. Thoughts without sincerity or falsehood are never grand, as logical and brilliant as they may be. The first and most important step is to seek the truth about human relationships, to know what you need to know for others and what they need to be for you. This brings you back to the search for the correct perspective. You should study biological and social evolution, read Darwin and Walter Tomad MLS, and when you read, think, ponder the whole until you see the world and men in the right way. Think about what God does until you can see what He does. The next step is to think about the right personal attitude. Your perspective tells you what the correct attitude is, and obedience to the soul leads you there. Only by fully concentrating your mind on the highest thing in you can you arrive at sincere thought. As long as you know that you are selfish in your goals, dishonest or corrupt in any way in your intentions or practices, your thoughts will be false and will have no power. Reflect on how you conduct your actions, intentions, goals, and practices until you know they are right. No one can understand the fact of their absolute unity with God without deep and sustained reflection. It is easy to think of going out of oneself to find God, but entering oneself to find Him is harder. Yet God is there, and in the sacred place of your own soul, you can meet Him face to face. The fact that everything you need is already within you is a wonderful thing, and you don't have to worry about how to obtain the power to do what you want or become what you want to be. You just have to think about how to properly use the power you have. The only thing to do is to start. Use your perception of truth to see it in this day. Live it fully, and you will see more truths tomorrow. To rid yourself of old false ideas, you will need to deeply reflect on the value of men, on the greatness and value of the human soul. You will have to stop looking at human errors and see the successes. Cease to see the flaws and see the virtues. You will no longer be able to consider men and women as lost and ruined beings heading towards hell. You will have to learn to consider them as shining souls, rising towards the sky. It will be necessary to call upon the strength of will to achieve this, but this is the correct use of will, deciding what to think and how to think. The role of the will is to direct thought. Think of the positive side of men, their charming and appealing aspect, and exert your will to reject any other idea about them. I know no one who has accomplished as much in this field as Jim V. from PGE, a two-time socialist candidate for the presidency of the United States. Mr. V pays tribute to humanity. He has never asked for help in vain. No one receives an unpleasant or reprehensible word from him. You cannot approach him without feeling his deep and sincere interest in you. Whether it's a millionaire, a worker soiled by labor, or a woman tired of working, they all receive the warmth of sincere brotherly love. Even a poorly dressed child who speaks to him on the street will not fail to receive instant and tender acknowledgement from PGE. He loves humanity, which has led him to become the leading figure of a great movement, the beloved hero of millions of hearts, and he will have an immortal name. It is a magnificent thing to love men, and this can only be achieved through thought. Nothing else can make you magnificent but thought. We can divide thinkers into those who think for themselves and those who also think for others. The latter are the rule, and the former are the exception. The former are original thinkers in a double sense, and are selfish in the noblest sense of the term. The key to every man is his thought. As robust and defiant as it may seem, it has a rudder it obeys, which is the idea by which all his acts are qualified. It can only be reformed by showing it an idea that dominates its own. All truly wise thoughts have already been thought 1,000 times, but to truly make them our own, we must sincerely rethink them until they take root in our personal expression. Everything a man is externally is nothing more than the expression and culmination of his inner thought. To work effectively, you must think clearly. To act nobly, you must think nobly. The grandest men are those who understand that spirituality is stronger than any material force and that thoughts govern the world. Some people study all their lives, and at the time of their death, they have learned everything except how to think. It is the habitual thought that fits into our lives and affects us even more than our most intimate social relationships. Not even our closest friends have as important a role in shaping our lives as the thoughts we entertain. When God releases a great thinker on this planet, all things are in danger. There is not a single part of science that cannot be rejected tomorrow, nor a renowned person who cannot be rejected and condemned. Think, think, think. Chapter 18, Jesus' idea of greatness. In chapter 23 of Matthew, Jesus makes a very clear distinction between true and false greatness. He also emphasizes the greatest danger for all those who wish to become great, the most insidious temptation that all must avoid, and relentlessly fight if they truly want to rise in the world. Addressing the crowd and his disciples, he warns them to be wary of adopting the principle of the Pharisees. He points out that although the Pharisees are righteous and upright men, honorable judges, true lawmakers, and fair in their dealings with men. They love the seats of honor at meetings, greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called masters. Regarding this principle, he says, "Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant." The idea that the average person has of a great man is not someone who serves, but someone who manages to be served. He puts himself in a position to command men and wield power over them by making them obey his will. Power over others is for most people something grand. Nothing seems sweeter to the selfish soul than that. Selfish individuals always try to dominate others. Savage men came to earth as soon as they began to enslave one another. For centuries, the struggle, whether it be warlike, diplomatic, political, or governmental, has aimed at securing control over other men. Kings and princes soaked the earth with blood and tears in the effort to extend their domains and power to rule over more people. The struggle in the business world today is the same as on the European battlefields a century ago concerning the dominant principle. Robert could not understand why men like Rockefeller and Carnegie seek more money and become slaves to commercial strife when they have more than they can spend. He considered it a kind of madness and illustrated it in the following way. Let's imagine a man who has 50,000 pairs of pants, 65,000 vests, 100,000 coats, and 150,000 ties. What would you think of him if he got up before dawn every morning and worked until after sunset every day, rain or shine, in all kinds of climates, just to get another tie? However, the possession of ties gives no one power over others, whereas the possession of dollars is what Rockefeller and Carnegie seek. They do not seek dollars but power. It is the principle of the Pharisee who struggles for a privileged position. It develops capable, cunning, ingenious men but not great men. I want you to make the distinction between these two ideas of greatness in your mind. If you were asked the name of the greatest American person, most would think of Abraham Lincoln. And is it not because in Lincoln, above all other men who have served us in the government, we recognize the spirit of service? Lincoln was a great man because he knew how to be a great servant. Napoleon was a brilliant, capable, cold and selfish man who sought high positions. Lincoln was great, but Napoleon was not. At the moment when someone begins to grow and is recognized as someone who accomplishes things in a grand manner, they are faced with the danger of the temptation to be condescending, to give advice, or to take complete charge of others' affairs. Sometimes this is an irresistible temptation. However, avoid the opposite danger of falling into servility or devoting yourself entirely to serving others. Doing this has been the ideal of many people. It has been thought that a completely selfless life is the life of Christ, due, in my opinion, to a completely erroneous conception of the character and teachings of Jesus. I have explained this mistaken concept in a small book that I hope you will be able to listen to someday, A New Christ. Thousands of people who claim to invite Jesus have supposedly humbled themselves and given up everything else to devote themselves to doing good, practicing an altruism that, in reality, is as morbid and far removed from greatness as the rankest of selfishnesses. The most primitive instincts that arise in the face of difficulties or distress are by no means all there is in you, and they do not represent the best part of you. There are other things you must do besides helping the unfortunate, although it is true that a large part of the life and activities of any great person must be devoted to helping others. When you start to progress, others will come to you. Do not reject them, but do not make the fatal mistake of assuming that a life of complete denial is the path to greatness. To add an additional note here, allow me to refer to the fact that Denver Sweet's classification of fundamental motivations is exactly the same as that of Jesus. He divides all men into two groups, those who live in pure love and those who live, as he says, in the love of ruling through self-love. You will see that this is exactly the same as the desire for power of the Pharisees. Denver Sweets regarded this selfish love for power as the cause of all sin because it was the only evil desire of the human heart, from which all other evil desires stemmed. Above this, he places pure love. He does not say love for God or love for man, but simply love. Almost all religious people place more importance on the love and service of God than on the love and service of man. It is a fact that love for God is not sufficient to save a man from the thirst for power. Indeed, some of the most fervent lovers of divinity have been the worst tyrants. often. Lovers of God are tyrannical, and lovers of men are often indiscreet and too zealous. Chapter 19. Perspective of Evolution. But how can we avoid engaging in altruistic work if we are surrounded by poverty, ignorance, suffering, or any kind of misery that many people go through? For those who live surrounded by outstretched hands asking for help, it must be difficult to refrain from continually giving. Moreover, there are social irregularities and injustices committed against the weak that inflame generous souls with the almost irresistible desire to fix things. We want to launch a crusade and believe that the evils will never be corrected until we fully dedicate ourselves to the task. In all this, it is necessary to resort to perspective. We must remember that it is not a bad world, but a good world in development. There is no doubt that there was a time when there was no life on this earth. The testimony of geology, proving that the planet was once a ball of fiery gas and molten rock, is indisputable, and we do not know how life could have existed in such conditions, as it seems impossible. Geology tells us that a crust formed later. The planet cooled and hardened, gases condensed and became mist or fell as rain. The cooled surface cracked and became soil, moisture accumulated, lagoons and seas gathered, and finally, something appeared in the water or on land that was alive. It is reasonable to assume that the first life was that of unicellular organisms, but behind those cells was the insistent impulse of the spirit, the great unique life seeking to express itself. Quickly, organisms with too much life to express with a single cell had two cells, then many more, and even more life poured into them. Multicellular organisms formed, such as plants, trees, vertebrates, and mammals. Many had strange forms, but all were perfect in their species, as is everything God makes. There were no doubt crude and almost monstrous forms, both in the animal and plant kingdom. But everything served its purpose in its time, and everything was very good. Then came another day, the great day of the evolutionary process, a day when the morning stars sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy at the beginning of the end. For man, the sought-after goal from the beginning, appeared on the stage, a monkey barely different from the surrounding beasts in appearance, but with a capacity for growth and thought infinitely different. Art and beauty, architecture and song, poetry and music, all this was possible in the soul of this monkey man, yet for his time and species it was very good. For it is God who works in you both to will and to do according to his good pleasure, says St. Paul. Since the day man first appeared, God began working on men, putting more and more of himself into each succeeding generation, stimulating greater achievements and better social, governmental, and domestic conditions. Those who look back in ancient history and see the terrible conditions that existed, the barbarism, idolatry, suffering, feel that it was cruel and unjust to man. From the monkey man to the man of the coming Christ, the species had to evolve. This could only be accomplished by the successive development of the various powers and capacities present in the human brain. God desired to express himself and live in a form, but not just that, he wanted to live in a form where he could express himself on the highest moral and spiritual plane. God wanted to evolve a form in which he could live as a God and manifest as a God. That was the purpose of evolution. The times of war, bloodshed, suffering, injustice, and cruelty were tempered by love and justice as time went on. This developed man's brain to a point where he should be capable of giving a full expression of God's love and justice. The end has not yet come, for God's purpose is not the perfection of a few chosen specimens to be exhibited like the large fruits at the top of a box. But the glorification of the species will come. There will come a time when the reign of God will be established on earth, the one dreamed of by the visionary of the island of Patmos, where there will be no more crying or pain, for the former things will have passed away, and there will be darkness. Chapter 20. Serving God. I have guided you through 2 previous chapters to finally resolve the question of service. It is a question that perplexes many sincere people, making it difficult for them to find an answer when they start acting for themselves and practicing the science of becoming great. They are necessarily compelled to rearrange many of their relationships, friends who might need to be sidelined, parents with whom they do not get along and feel slighted in some way. The truly great man is often considered selfish by a large circle of people who are in relation to him and feel they should receive more benefits than he offers. The initial question is it my duty to make the best of myself regardless of others, or should I wait until I can do so without any conflict or causing losses to anyone? This is the question of self-service versus serving others. The service to the world has been extensively discussed in the previous minutes, so now I will address the idea of serving God. An immense number of people have great uncertainty, if not anxiety, about what they should do for God. The amount of work and service done for Him in the United States in ecclesiastical work and others is enormous. A huge amount of human energy is spent in what is called serving God. I think I can clarify that the conventional idea of what it means to serve God is entirely wrong. When Moses was in Egypt to free the Hebrews from slavery, his demand to Pharaoh on behalf of God was, "Let my people go that they may serve me." He led them into the wilderness and instituted a new form of worship that led many people to assume that worship is serving God. Yet later, God Himself clearly stated that He did not care for ceremonies or offerings. The teaching of Jesus, if rightly understood, would entirely eliminate organized worship in the temple. God does not need what men can do for Him with their hands, bodies, or voices. St. Paul emphasizes that man can do nothing for God needs nothing. The perspective of evolution we have adopted shows us God seeking to express Himself through man throughout successive ages, where His Spirit has pushed man forward. God has continued seeking His expression through each generation of men, each generation being more like God than the previous, demanding more beautiful homes, pleasant environments, enjoyable work, rest, travel, and study opportunities than the previous generation. I have heard some economists argue that today's workers should be completely satisfied because their condition is much better than that of a worker 200 years ago who slept in a windowless hut on a floor covered in straw with his pigs. If this man had everything he needed to live the life he had, he was perfectly content. If he lacked something, he was not content. Today's man has a comfortable home and many things unknown in the past. If he has everything he needs to live his life, he will be content, but he is not satisfied. God has raised the species to a level where any individual can imagine a better and more desirable life than what he could have lived in the existing conditions. As long as this is true, as long as a man can think and clearly imagine a more desirable life, he will be dissatisfied with the life he must live. Discontent is God's mind urging men toward more desirable conditions. It is God-seeking manifestation in competition. He works in us both to will and to do. The only service you can render to God is to give expression to what He is trying to give to the world through you. The only service you can render to God is to make the best of yourself so that He lives in you and maximizes your abilities. In a previous work of this series, The Science of Getting Rich, I refer to the child playing the piano, whose music could not be expressed through his inexperienced hands. Here is a good illustration of how the Spirit of God is around us, inside all of us, to accomplish great things, provided that we train our hands, feet, minds, brains, and bodies to serve it. Your sole obligation to God, to yourself, and to the world is to become as great a person as possible. It seems to me that this resolves the question of service. There remain one or two things to clarify to conclude this chapter. I wrote about opportunity in the previous chapter, asserting in general that every man can become great, just as I stated in The Science of Getting Rich. But these generalizations must be nuanced. There are men with such materialistic minds that they are entirely incapable of understanding the philosophy presented in these books. There exists a great mass of men and women who have lived and worked until they became practically unable to think of these ideas and, therefore, incapable of receiving the message. We can act for them through demonstration, by living our lives before them. That is the only way to awaken them. The world needs demonstrations more than teachings. Concerning this crowd of people, our duty is to develop our personality to the maximum so that they see and desire to do the same. It is our duty to become great for them. Thus, we can prepare the world so that the next generation has better thinking conditions. Often, individuals write to me wanting to act for themselves and leave the world but are hindered by the ties of home, by the presence of other people more or less dependent on them, and they fear they will suffer if they abandon them. In general, I advise these people to depart without fear and give the best of themselves. If damages occur at home, they will be only temporary, for soon. If they follow the guide of the Spirit, they can better take care of their dependents than they ever have before. Chapter 21. Mental Exercise. The purpose of mental exercises must not be misinterpreted. There is no virtue in formulas or strings of words uttered, because there is no shortcut to development by repeating prayers or incantations. A mental exercise is an exercise not of repeating words, but of thinking certain thoughts. As Goethe says, phrases we hear repeatedly become convictions, and thoughts we think repeatedly become habitual and shape who we are. The aim of a mental exercise is for you to think certain thoughts repeatedly until it becomes a habit, and then those will be your thoughts all the time. If done correctly and understood for its purpose, mental exercises have great value, but if practiced as most people do, they are useless. The thoughts outlined in the following exercise are the ones you must think of. You'll need to perform the exercise once or twice a day, but you must continuously think of these thoughts, i.e., not think of them twice a day for a defined period, and then forget them until it's time to redo the exercise. The exercise aims to instill continuous thought. Choose a time when you can have 20 to 30 minutes uninterrupted and try to get comfortable. Lie comfortably in a reclining chair, a sofa, or on a bed, ideally on your back. If you're pressed for time, do the exercise when going to bed at night and before rising in the morning. Start by focusing your attention on your body, from head to toe, relaxing each muscle as you go. Completely relax. Then, eliminate from your mind physical and other ailments. Pass your attention along the spine and nerves to the extremities, and meanwhile think, my nerves are in perfect condition throughout my body. They obey my will, and I have an excellent nervous system. Then, focus on your lungs and think, I breathe deeply and calmly. Air fills the cells of my lungs that are in perfect condition. My blood is purified and clean. Next, on your heart. My heart beats strongly and steadily. My circulation is perfect, even in the extremities. Then, on your digestive system. My stomach and intestines perform their work perfectly. My foods are digested and assimilated. As my body rebuilds and nourishes itself, my liver, kidneys, and bladder. Each perform their various functions without pain or effort. I am perfectly well. My body rests. My mind is calm. My soul is at peace. I have no anxiety regarding financial or other matters. God within me is also in all things I desire and draws them to me. Everything I want has already been given to me. I have no anxiety for my health as I am perfectly well. I have no concern or fear. I transcend above any temptation of moral wrongdoing. I reject all greed, all selfishness, all personal ambition. I have no envy, malice, or animosity towards anyone. I will not act against my highest ideals. I am right and will do what is just. In perspective, all that is good in the world is perfect and progressing towards fullness. In contemplating the facts of social, political, and industrial life solely from this elevated perspective, everything is very good. I will see all human beings, all my acquaintances, friends, neighbors, members of my own household in the same way. All are good. Nothing is bad in the universe. Nothing can be bad except my own personal state of mind, and I will maintain it correctly. All my confidence is in God. I will obey my soul and remain faithful to what is within me, the highest. I will seek within myself the idea of good in all things, and when I find it, I will express it in my outer life. I will forget all that has been outgrown for the better I can think of. I will have the highest thoughts regarding all my relationships, thus my conduct and actions must express these thoughts. Identification. There is only one substance and one source that I am made of and united with. It is my Father from whom I proceed and come. My Father and I are one. My Father is greater than me, and I do His will. I engage in conscious unity with the pure Spirit, for there is only one, and it is everywhere. I am one with eternal consciousness. Idealization. Create an image of how you want to be, and as great as your imagination allows. Think about it for a moment while maintaining the thought. This is what I truly am. It is an idea of my own progress towards perfection. It is truly what I am. It is an idea of my own perfection progressing towards realization. In contemplating the facts of social, political, and industrial life solely from this elevated perspective, everything is very good. I will see all human beings, all my acquaintances, friends, neighbors, members of my own household in the same way. All are good. Nothing is bad in the universe. Nothing can be bad except my own personal state of mind, and I will maintain it correctly. All my confidence is in God. Realization. I adopt the power to become what I want to be and do what I want to do. I use creative energy. All existing power is mine. I will rise with strength and absolute confidence. I will take powerful actions with the strength of the Lord my God. I trust and fear not, for God is with me. Chapter 22. Summary of the Science of Being Great. All men are made of a single intelligent substance. Therefore, all possess the same essential powers and faculties. Greatness is equally inherent in everyone and can be manifested by all. Every constituent of God is a constituent of man. Man can surpass both inheritance and circumstances by using the inherent creative power of the soul. To achieve greatness, the soul must act upon the mind and body. Human knowledge is limited and subject to error due to ignorance. To avoid this, one must connect their soul to the universal mind. The universal mind is the intelligent substance from which all things proceed. It exists in all things and acts through them. All things are known by this universal mind, and man can unite with it to acquire all knowledge. To achieve this, man must expel everything that separates him from God. He must desire to live the divine life and rise above all moral temptations. He must abandon any behavior that does not align with his highest ideals. He must attain the correct perspective to recognize that God is everything, present in all, and that nothing is inherently bad. He must see that nature, society, government, and industry are perfect in their current state and progressing towards completion. He must perceive that all men and women in the world are good and perfect. You must know that all is well in the world and join God in accomplishing his perfect work. Only when man sees God as the great presence progressing in everything and acknowledges all as good can he rise to true greatness. You must dedicate yourself to serving the highest within you by obeying the voice of the soul. There is an inner light in every man that continually urges him towards what is higher, and he must be guided by this light if he wishes to become great. He must acknowledge the fact that he is one with the Father and consciously affirm this unity for himself and for all others. You must know that you are a God among gods and act accordingly. You must have absolute faith in your own perception of truth and start acting according to that perception within you. When you see the true and good path in small things, you must take it. You must cease acting reflexively and begin thinking. You must be sincere in your thinking. You must form the highest idea of yourself and maintain it until it becomes your habitual way of thinking. You must keep this idea constantly in mind. You must eternally realize and express this idea in your actions. You must conduct everything you do grandly in your relationships with your family, neighbors, acquaintances, and friends. You must make every act an expression of your ideal, the man who has the right perspective, who makes a complete dedication, who idealizes himself as a magnificent being, and who makes every act, however trivial an ideal expression, has already attained greatness. Everything he does he will do magnificently. He will be recognized as a powerful personality. He will receive knowledge through inspiration and will know everything he needs to know. He will receive all material wealth formed by his thoughts, and he will lack nothing good. He will receive the ability to face any situation that may arise, while his growth and progress will be continuous and rapid. Great works will seek him, and all men will rejoice in honoring him for his particular worth. For the student of the science of being great, I conclude this book by giving an excerpt from Emerson's essay on the Oversoul. This important essay is essential, as it lays out the fundamental principles of monism and the science of greatness. I recommend its study in relation to this book. This universal feeling is not the feeling of deprivation and ignorance, but the subtle insinuation by which the great soul asserts its immense claim, because men feel that the natural history of man has never been written but always leaves behind what has been said of him. What has become old and of no value are the metaphysical books. The philosophy of 6,000 years has not sought into the chambers and compartments of the soul. In its experiments, it has always ultimately left a residue it could not resolve. Man is a stream whose source is hidden. Our being always descends into us from somewhere unknown. Even the most exact of calculators cannot foresee that an incalculable thing may happen the next moment. I am continually compelled to acknowledge that there is a higher origin for events than the will I call mine. As with events, so it is with thoughts. When I observe that river flowing and temporarily pouring its currents into me from regions I cannot see, I see that I am a tenant, not a cause, but a surprised spectator of that aqueous ether I desire, and look upwards, adopting an attitude of reception. But from whatever foreign energy these visions come, the supreme judge of all errors of the past and present, and the only prophet of what must be, is found in that great soul in which we rest as the earth reposes in the gentle arms of the atmosphere. This unity, this oversoul in which the particularity of each man is contained and merges with all others, this common heart, to which all sincere conversation implies adoration and to which all right action implies submission, this overwhelming reality that confounds our tricks and talents to compel each to pass through what he is, and to speak of his character, not his tongue, always tends and claims to pass into our thought and hand to become wisdom, virtue, power, and beauty. We live in succession, in division, in parts, in particles. Within man is the soul of the whole and the wise silence, the universal beauty to which each part of the particle is equally connected, the eternal one, and that profound power in which we exist and whose bliss is entirely accessible to us. Not only is it self-sufficient and perfect at every moment, but the act of seeing the thing seen, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object, are one. We see in parts in the world like the sun, the moon, the animal, the tree, but the whole, of which these shining parts are, is the soul. Only through the vision of this wisdom can we read the horoscope of the ages, and only by resorting to our best thoughts or yielding to the spirit of prophecy inherent in every man, can we know what every man's words, speaking of this life, say. They may seem vain to those who do not inhabit the same thought. I dare not speak of it. My words do not bear the august sense. They remain short and cold. Only he who wants and watches can inspire. His speech will be lyrical and sweet and universal as the flow of the wind. However, I desire, by profane words, if I cannot use the sacred, to indicate the heaven of this divinity, and to inform on the hints I have gathered of the transcendence of the simplicity and energy of the supreme law. If we consider what happens during conversation, in dreams, in remorse, in moments of passion, in surprises, in dream instructions, where we often see ourselves masked, the graceful costumes only serve to exalt and highlight a real element, compelling it to be clearly noticed. We will capture many clues that will broaden and enlighten the understanding of the secret of nature. Everything shows us that the soul in man is not an organ, but an immatis, and exercises all organs. It is not a function like the power of memory, calculation, comparison, but it serves these as if they were hands and feet. It is not a faculty, but a light. It is not the intellect or the will, but the master of the intellect and the will. It is the vast foundation of our being, where they are as an unowned immensity, and cannot be owned from within or behind. A light shines through us onto things, and makes us aware that we are nothing but that light is everything. Man is the facade of a temple where all wisdom and goodness reside. What we commonly call man, the man who eats, drinks, plants, counts, does not represent himself in the form in which we know him, but distorts himself. We do not respect him, but the soul of which he is the organ. And if he allowed it to appear through his action, he would make us bend the knee. When it breathes through his intellect, it is genius, When it flows through his affection, it is love. The rhythm of his progress must be calculated according to its own law, and not by arithmetic. The progress of the soul is not made by gradation like a straight line, but by an ascent of state, like a metamorphosis, from the egg to the caterpillar, from the caterpillar to the butterfly. The growth of genius has an absolute character that does not advance the individual chosen above John, after Adam, after Richard, but gives to each the pain of discovered inferiority. But for every impulse of growth, man extends where he works and surpasses at each pulsation all species and populations of men. With each divine impulse, the spirit tears the thin bark of the visible and the finite, and goes out into eternity to inspire and expire its heir. This is the law of moral and mental gain. The simple ascend as by specific levity, not to any particular virtue, but to the region of all virtues, which are in the mind that contains them all. The soul is superior to all the peculiarities of merit. The soul demands purity, but purity is not that. It demands justice, but justice is not that. It demands beneficence, but it is something better. Thus, there is a sort of descent and adaptation that is felt when we cease to speak of moral nature to insist on a virtue to which it is united, because for the soul in its pure action, all virtues are natural in themselves and are not laboriously acquired. It speaks to its heart, and man suddenly becomes virtuous. In this same feeling is contained the germ of intellectual growth that obeys the same law. He who is capable of humility, justice, love, and aspiration is already on a platform that commands sciences and arts, speech and poetry, action and grace. For one who dies in this mortal beatitude already anticipates those special faculties that men value so much, just as love renders justice to all the gifts of the beloved object. The lover has no talent or skill that has his beloved maiden by the faculty she possesses, and the heart that surrenders to the Supreme Spirit is bound to all its works and will follow a royal path towards the most particular knowledge and powers. By ascending to this primary and original sentiment, we have passed from our distant position in the circumference to the center of the world, and there, as in the cabinet of God, we see the causes and anticipate the universe, which is but a slow process. Thank you very much for your visit.